Well, morning everybody, and thank you for coming today, joining us on our HubSpot and sales growth webinar. It's one of a series of webinars that we've been doing at the end of last year and the start of this year, just to widen out some of our IT and our web customers around some of the other kind of services that you can add onto the website and the IT that you've got with us. So it's great to see so many of you with us today. We are joined as our guests today by Wellmeadow, by David and Richard, who are going to be talking about sales growth, about HubSpot and some of the other features and parts of those systems. So I'm going to hand over to them, and they're going to talk us through and give us some demos and talk about some of their experience of using those systems. If you have any questions, just put them all in the chat, and then as we get to the end of their kind of their demo, we can ask some of the questions, and we can have a bit of a Q&A session along with it as well. I'm going to hand over now to David and Richard, and they're going to talk us about today's webinar.
Thank you, Peter. Thanks for the intro. And as Peter said, if you've got questions as you go along, that's fine. Happy to make this reasonably interactive as we go, but I'll rely on Pete doing the MC job of gathering those questions together and firing them at us. So Pete, you just interrupt with your mic on and shut us up so that we can answer whatever it is going along. If you do use the hand up thing in Teams, we may not spot it. You know what it's like when you're trying to present. You've got lots of things to watch at once. So I'm just going to try the first experiment, see if I can share my screen. It's always the first bit that you wonder if that's going to work or not. So it's in a browser, so I'm hoping that you can see a browser window. And
Looking good.
Pete and nod or shake your head. Yeah, brilliant, fantastic. And I'm going to try and keep as many images open in the background as I can in the meantime, so I can see all your reactions of shock, horror, or whatever it may be. So I'm doing this in a browser, so you can see from the URL at the top there, if you need to either follow along or bookmark it or refer to it later, then you might find that useful because it's got some links to some of the material that we're going to be showing, which is all web-based as well. So it saves you having to take maybe as many notes as you would have done. And as Pete said in his introduction, we're trying to cover a couple of things here. It's to show you HubSpot. Some people have heard of HubSpot, some people haven't. You may not have seen under the bonnet, so we're going to show you a bit of that. And HubSpot, like a few other methodologies, is built around the principle of inbound marketing. And people have bandied that term around quite a lot, and there's an awful lot of stuff that's been written about it. So we wanted to cover a bit of that as well, just to help answer any questions you may have on what is it, and is it the sort of snake oil and smoke and mirrors, or is there something useful in it? So Pete's already started the introductions, and on our website you can see what the rest of our team looks like as well. We've got Richard and me. Oh, I just scrolled up there. We've got Richard and me heading up a team of 6 of us, all taking different specialist roles within the team, and that allows us to bring lots of different skills and experiences to bear. Okay, so there's the team that we've got there, and Richard and I head up various different bits of this. Richard very much more creative than I am, so I'll be handing over to Richard halfway through to talk through some of the explanation of how this works. So first off, I wanted to, these are the questions, by the way, we put in the flyer for the event. I wanted to take these in the order that I put them out, just to keep faithful to our promise to you on what we would cover. And the first one is the role of the marketing department being to generate leads. Now, I go to lots of our clients, and marketing is seen in lots of different ways. Sometimes as an overhead that just has to be tolerated, sometimes as a critical part of the business, and everything in between. And our view very much is that the marketing department isn't there just to produce materials on the demand of the owner or whomever, but it's very much a critical part of the business process designed to generate leads. And I'm going to show you an image now that we'll end up coming back to, but I just want to show you the sort of the headline of all of this. Under the top banner, I've broken the link on that. The point of it is that when you go, can you remember what page that was on? The top of the GG, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, I'm just going to show you that directly. We have a little shortcut to get us there for such occasions. We're going to show you the whole of this grid in a minute of under the bonnet, but the top end of it is where it shows the transition of how someone who's completely unknown to you as a business goes right through to being an advocate of a customer. And the point of just showing you this top bit at the moment is to show where that handoff is between marketing and sales. So marketing is clearly at the left-hand end of this graph, where we've got strangers coming into our system, and sales is definitely over the right hand here. And we see the cutoff being around about this point where leads are qualified. So it's marketing's job to generate these leads, attract strangers into the business, capture their details so that they're a known person, so they're now a visitor instead of a stranger. And then through monitoring their behavior and encouraging them to interact more and more, we get to analyze that visitor to find out where are they. And we're going to come back in a minute and talk about buyer personas and buyer journeys. And so we've got a lot more information about that contact than just an email address and maybe first name, last name or company. So we get them to this point here. And then the critical part is that we keep in touch with them. And we're going to talk about that in a moment in the difference between inbound and outbound. But we nurture those contacts that we've created until they become a lead. So they signal in some way through their behavior or what they click or what they view that they are now a lead. And therefore, that's the point where we pass them over to sales. So in HubSpot's language, they have these two terms, marketing qualified lead and sales qualified lead. And this is the point where you agree with your sales team as a marketing team, what is the marketing qualified lead definition? And that's when you hand them over to sales. Then they take it over, they do a qualification of more of a salesy type style. They've got budget, authority, needs, timing, that sort of thing. And that's when they put them into the deal pipeline. Okay, so that's where we were on where do you hand over and the purpose of marketing department being to generate leads. So what's the difference between inbound and outbound? It's a term that's easy to bandy around and neither are bad. But the point about outbound, which is regarded as more traditional marketing, is where we are pumping information out all the time, quite often about the company, our product, services. We've won an award, we've taken on a new employee, we've opened a new office, that sort of thing, case studies. And that has its place. And you would include in there all sorts of things like exhibitions and so on. The difference between that and inbound is that we're creating content in inbound that people will find because it's interesting and useful, and they will come to you. And the point of using the whole infrastructure, which HubSpot helps us to do, is that by getting good rankings on SEO or pitching stuff through social media, that strangers will come to our website to learn something new because we're creating content that they want. And it's almost the opposite of the outboundy style. It's not talking about us as a company, and we wouldn't mention too much about a new employee or a new office or an award and that sort of thing. We're trying to understand all the time, what is it that that person would really value reading about right now? If we're trying to grab them in their coffee break, it's almost a coffee break test, would they be prepared to Google something and find us or respond to an email and read up something which is interesting or useful for them? And that's the challenge of it, because that takes a lot more creativity. And the point of it is that you don't think of the whole marketing and sales process as a funnel, which is why halfway down here we talk about flywheels, not funnels. The point of this flywheel approach is that we attract these strangers in and engage them and keep moving them around that circle, keep nurturing them until that prospect is ready to buy. And we can't force somebody to have the right timing for whatever it is that they may have a need for our services. So we need to keep in touch with them for as long as it takes. So we don't regard a funnel as something where leads go in at the top and you go through various stages and you either win or lose at the bottom. Some will spin out of the flywheel as a one deal, which is great, but the others are never lost. It's not the contact that's ever lost. You have to keep thinking about new content to keep them engaged, so that when the timing is right, they know about you, they've built up a level of trust, and you've established a position of expertise in your market because you've been constantly writing about useful and interesting content. So I'm pointing you to various pages on our website here because there's just loads of material we've written around this. Not surprisingly, I'm trying to be under the banner of useful and interesting content because that's what we're using to pump out through both SEO results and more directed content to our audience to make them want to come around our website and look around more. So that's the difference in inbound and outbound. Like I say, it's creating content to bring people in. Now, how we structure that content has got a couple of different dimensions to it. And I'm going to talk now about buyer personas and buyer journeys. And you can almost imagine these two things being on two axes of a chart. Now, the buyer persona is critically important. It's a semi-fictionalized account of who it is you're trying to sell to. And you may have several of them. We've got half a dozen or so in our business, from Marketing Mike and Sales Steve and HubSpot Harry. And it's just a funny, quirky tradition that these things tend to be alliteratively named, as you noticed with those. We have Lonely Luke as well, that sole business owner who wants someone to talk to. And the idea is that you consolidate the people you know in your world, people you've already sold to, prospects you've spoken to before, and you try and come up with this homogenized version of that type of person, and they're likely to have similar behaviors, similar needs, and so on. And by having that definition clear for each of the buyer personas that you're talking to, it allows us all to refer back to that and say, well, is this thing that we're now creating, is that actually going to be interesting to HubSpot Harry or Marketing Mike? Is that something they want to read? Or are we just pumping out stuff that they can get in 100 different places and we're not saying anything new? So actually, if you look at the complexity of a buyer persona, we've created this canvas, which you may recognize as being based on other canvases you may have seen. And these are all different dimensions of a buyer persona. I'm not going to go through them all, but you can see that we're trying to attack every different angle of what this behavior type might be. You might even come up with an image of them, but we're looking at, are they in a certain age group? Have they got certain backgrounds? What sort of behaviors do they have? Where do they consume media? You know, are they on TikTok or Reddit, or are they on LinkedIn, or are they on none of those things? And what sort of things are they interested in beyond even what we think might be relevant for our work here? So, for example, we've identified that a number of the business owners that we work with may be quite interested in fitness and so on, or outdoors activities. So that's not an irrelevant fact. You may well be able to weave that into some of your material, draw links to it, and create an interest around something like that. We had a discussion recently with an insurance firm, and we were trying to work out who their buyer personas were. And they thought that their needs were all around that renewal point in the year when an insurance company tries to capture a new client. But as I pointed out to them, their target customer, their buyer persona, isn't lying awake at night worrying about their renewal. It's a bit of a hygiene factor thing, really. They're worried about all sorts of other things, maybe about risk generally, but probably just about running their business. What's the state of the economy? What's the recruitment position at the moment? What's the inflation going to be? A lot more things outside of what the insurance company thought would be appropriate for them to be able to talk about. So actually, we managed to, by broadening that view of who their buyer was, we created a lot more ideas about the type of content that we could create for that type of buyer persona. So like I say, you've come up with a number of different buyer personas. That canvas is downloadable from the website just to sketch some ideas on and try and get your team to agree who it is. You'll need your sales team to help with that. They're the ones that are talking to your customers most. And the point to try and mention, and we trip up with this all the time, by calling it buyer persona, people think the other person has to be a buyer in the traditional sense, you know, a purchasing manager type person. That's not the case. A buyer in this sense is anybody who takes advantage of your services. So it could be a consumer, it could be an engineer, it could be someone in the business that's making a decision. So they're the buyer personas. But then we've got this thing called the buyer journey. You can almost imagine that each buyer persona might be on a different part of their journey. And most of us as buyers, when we're buying online or in the real world in shops, we go through kind of a 3-stage process on our buyer journey. And those 3 stages are awareness, consideration, and decision. So for the awareness phase, there's certain things you'd want to talk about to your buyer personas, which are more educational in sense. You're trying to just create an awareness of the general field. When that buyer persona has moved on to the consideration phase, you can go into a bit more detail, talking about the competitors and the pros and cons and so on. And once they've gone through that and they've decided they're going to go for something in your area, they're now choosing which one of maybe a short list of 2 or 3 suppliers. Now they're in the decision phase. And so if I show you some example approaches that you might take that differ depending on where they are in that buyer journey, here's the awareness, consideration, and decision headings. And you can see that the type of marketing content that we might put out would be different for each of these stages. So like I say, in the awareness stage, it may be how-to videos or an ebook as a general introduction to the subject. Whereas in the consideration phase, you might have free samples if that applies, case studies to show how it works in detail, infographic, maybe checklist, that type of thing. And then when we go into decision, now we're getting down to the short strokes of choosing who. So you might want comparisons of different suppliers in the market. You might want a demo or a trial or some sort of introduction to the product, which is a lower risk. Sometimes we found it quite useful to help prepare the pitch deck for the person making the decision, acknowledging the fact that they've got to present this to their board or decision-making group. So we can help them do that, as well as testimonials and any offers we may have to help them make their decision quicker. So like I say, imagine in your mind, you've got this grid where you've got the buyer journey down one side and all the buyer personas along the rest. Each box in that grid has to have some view of what would be the content for that person at that stage. It doesn't have to be unique in that grid, you might share it, but you have to bear that in mind so that when we're trying to push material out that is interesting and useful, we're tailoring it. And this is the biggest problem we see with lots of businesses we work with. They have this, let's call it a newsletter, the form on everybody's website, sign up for our newsletter, notoriously ignored most of the time. And if you've got a subscriber base that you're sending your newsletter to, it tends to be a one-size-fits-all newsletter. Everybody gets the same thing. And yet, if you're really trying to nurture and maximize your conversions, then it's really about sending more tailored content, depending on where somebody is on their buyer journey and what type of buyer they are. So that's a bit of a whistle-stop tour of the whole what is inbound, buyer personas and journeys. We've put all of this into a guide. This is the guide I think we're going to link to, and I'm going to show you in a minute where you get that online. If you go into the Wellmeadow Co UK website /our-content, then you'll see that there we've put a lot of our material on there, both for the work we do in supporting boards of directors and also around our lead generation and work. Here's one around building a business growth engine, but this is the booklet I'm talking to you about, the Intro to Inbound Marketing, and it's got some very useful worksheets on there, building up to that canvas that I talked about in this book. And you can see, just because I'm holding one up in the air, we've even got some of these printed because it's so easy to print reasonably small volumes, 10 or 20 off of these things, and we can post these out to people who want them. So please, if you're interested in getting your hands on one of those or reading it digitally, just click on the that call to action button there, and you'll see this coming up as what we talk about later on in how HubSpot deals with this. But there's what you might regard as a traditional form. The way HubSpot works is to get you to have lots of different styles of form, and they can each ask different things. And there's some very clever techniques you can use where it'll ask progressively for more information depending how much it already knows. Okay, so please feel free to go on there and download that for the price of your email address. So hopefully that gets you to the point of understanding that first part. I'm going to hand over to Richard now, and he's going to pick up the thread there and talk about some of the work we do. We've got people in the system. We've got those strangers attracted.
Good morning, everybody. Is it possible to just throw the growth generator up from that link there?
This one here.
I think it was that one there, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So we've already had a brief look at the what we call our kind of growth generator model. Now, this is a kind of our attempt at combining some of the things that Dave talked about in the buyer's journey, plus some of the kind of inbound philosophy into one overarching framework that we can use to organize our marketing activity. So the way that this sort of works is what we're trying to do is organize different types of activity under different stages that somebody might be at. So, and also depending on where your business is. So, for example, if you're looking to win new customers, you may need to be looking at how do we attract a different market segment, or just attract new people who might be interested in our product. That type of activity that you want to be looking at is maybe focusing on SEO, maybe doing some PPC, social media, podcasts, your website, those sorts of things. Now, that can be quite different to if you already have a load of contacts that you already know and you want to be just nurturing them. So you might be focusing more on email marketing or creating content for your existing customers that they want to value. So it's really kind of a horses for courses approach. But the point is to try and spread the net, and in all of these things, the content that you're creating has to be adding value so that people are going to engage with it. So our sort of mantra on this is to create content that is engaging, entertaining, but also educational as well. Now, the neat thing around HubSpot with this is that all of this activity can be managed through one ecosystem. So I'm sure you're used to maybe things like Hootsuite or email marketing tools like MailChimp or Constant Contact, those sorts of things. So you can end up with a whole load of different tools that you're looking at for managing your SEO or your PPC or social media. The neat thing around HubSpot is that within their marketing ecosystem, all of this activity can be managed in one place. So what that means is you get a really kind of holistic overview of what's working with your marketing activity and the ability to organize your content in a way that is much more efficient than trying to do it across multiple different platforms. So was there anything you want to add on that?
No, I think it's good. You've covered the major points there. And as we said earlier on, the handover to the sales department isn't where it stops. The bit that you see covering across several of these is activity tracking and HubSpot scores. And we'll come back to that,
yeah.
But we're going to look at trying to work out from how people are interacting with us, where are they through this journey?
So one of the things then that we look at on this is to say, well, once you've got people onto your website, so you've done some work either be it by search engine optimization, SEO, PPC, maybe put something on YouTube, some videos or something. How do you, once you've got them to your website, how do you get them to give you your details? So this is, I suppose, an example of that was what we've just shown you in terms of the intro to inbound ebook. So we can sort of contrast that, and then there may be a couple of different things you can think about here. The buyer persona matrix that we just showed you, or the buyer persona canvas, we give that away for free. We're not asking you for an email address for that. It's a one-page sheet of paper. There's nothing too impressive about it in one sense. You can just click a button and download that. But for something that's got more value in it, you want to try and get that content behind a form or something where you can actually get the contact details of that person who wants that content. And it's surprising to see how many websites actually give away quite a lot of valuable content without actually asking for email addresses in return. Now, the neat thing with HubSpot, they have very, very powerful forms, as Dave's already alluded to. So you can have what they call progressive forms, where if you already know, the HubSpot system already knows information about that particular contact, you can queue different fields so that it won't ask them what their company name is again. It might ask them, I don't know, what size the company is or something like that. So you're gradually building up that picture of that contact, building up that buyer persona picture. And for those of you who are using WordPress websites, very, very powerful plugin from HubSpot into WordPress. So you can actually build these HubSpot forms into your WordPress website with pretty much a click of a button.
I think it's worth mentioning at that point, because one of the things that amazed me that HubSpot could do, and maybe some other software can do this, but I've not come across it, is the way it labels the cookie.
Yeah.
Now, the fact that it can do what Richard just said with the progressive forms, and another thing it does, whenever there's a form, it will pre-populate on that form anything it already knows about you. So your overhead of filling it in is even lighter. The way it can do that is because it knows who you are by labeling the cookie. And there's several different ways we can get people to identify themselves. It could be responding to an email. It could be having previously filled in a form. But as soon as you fill in a form on this, the cookie hasn't changed. So it knows all the activity you've done on our website for the last 6 months. So it can tell us where have you been in the past, even though it's only now that you've identified yourself. And that is incredibly powerful. And once it's done that, it will also give us notifications. My phone will ping to say that someone who's previously been on our website has just gone back on the website and they're on the pricing page or on the contact us page. And that is incredibly powerful in terms of you can imagine how you might use that information. So it's all about that ability for it to draw a connection between the contact record that it knows about and the cookie that's dropped on your device, links the two together, and then it can give all sorts of powerful reporting on activity.
So I think then, so one of the ways that we try to approach getting details from visitors to the website is to try and build a bit of trust before. I suppose we've all been there where you get asked to give your email address and you think, am I just going to get spammed afterwards, or what am I doing once I release this? So one way of doing this is to take the content, such as if we take the example of the intro to inbound, and what we do is we actually unbundle it. So I think if we unbundle that content on something we call a pillar page. Now, the way that this works is that all of the content that is in that ebook that we've just sort of been talking about is actually available on this page. So you could go to this page, you could sit here and read this all, but this will be probably a 30 to 40-minute read, and basically people just don't have the time to do that. So, but what this does is it actually gives you an insight into what is it that I'm giving my email address away for. So it could seem sort of counterintuitive to say, well, give all your content away for free. But actually what we find is that an awful lot of people, we see much higher conversion rates from to people filling in forms when they've had a page such as this, such as a pillar page with all the content in it, because they know what they're getting. They can fill the form in with confidence that they're getting some quality content, and you're building that trust there as well. So that's just a good kind of technique to use. And then what we'll do with this, just from a marketing point of view, is each of these sections of this ebook will have a whole load of blogs around it. Those blogs will then point into this particular pillar page, and then the pillar page leads to the download. So it's all about creating that kind of network or web of content that is all pushing towards getting the form filled in.
And lots of CTAs as well. And
HubSpot as well is particularly good at managing the SEO aspect of this, managing the organization of the blog content. Very, very straightforward in terms of putting up these landing pages and the CTAs, which again can also have a huge amount of smart content behind it, depending upon who's on the website based on the cookie. That could display a different message or send them to a different page, depending upon how you've set those parameters up. So that's kind of how we get people to give us the details. So once we've got details of people, what is it that we actually do with them? And this is around what Dave talked about before, of nurturing the contacts that we've already got. So we've gone through the effort of attracting a whole lot of people to the website, got them on the website, engaged them with some content, and then got their email address. But not everybody, depending on your business, not everybody may be able or want or need to buy at that particular time. So you've got to keep them interested, engaged, build that trust, build that relationship over time. So this is around about making content that people are actually going to be interested in. Be able to click the link. So this is just to give you kind of a very high level overview of some of the stuff that we get involved in. It's all on the website, so you can kind of deep dive it or watch some of the stuff if you want. But it's all around making, as more and more we move to kind of a visual culture, a lot of this can be video. One of the techniques we're using at the moment is to potentially go in and record an interview with somebody for an hour or so, or film a load of footage of a business. And from that, we can probably then create between 50 to 100 different pieces of content, ranging from blogs, social media posts, videos, ebooks, etc. And all of that then has a massive impact in being able to just quickly fire out regular emails to customers with interesting content. So the thing behind this is always to be looking for what's the angle on something, be curious about it. And I think, did you want to talk about that particular example there where we actually came up with, or was that the market guide below?
It comes on in a minute.
Yeah. So we've got different types of content that we're creating, ebooks and tools for measuring ROI. What we're doing is when we're creating particular graphics for an ebook, we're then animating those, putting those out on social media. That's getting huge kind of impact, leveraging sort of what we're doing. I don't know what that one is.
It's all to load that.
It's well to load that one. We're getting a lag on it.
Yeah.
Even making things as crazy as, kind of dressing up as Santa Claus and wandering around a foundry and making videos on that.
I think that's been a lifelong ambition to dress up as Santa.
So it sort of ranges from the sublime to the ridiculous sometimes, but it's all about creating things that actually cut through the noise and grab people's attention. Average attention span is about 8 seconds, so we've got to kind of do something different, which I suppose leads nicely onto this bit.
Yeah, and this is a challenge, and we're really pleased that Matt, who's the MD over at Central Pattern Making, is very brave on this, and he's drunk the Kool-Aid on the whole HubSpot philosophy. And it's about giving stuff that really is useful and interesting, even when you think it might be counterintuitive for a supplier to present this information. So here's an example where he's in a number of markets. One of them is the composite tooling market. And we did a survey of all of the other companies in the composite tooling market using Companies House data and LinkedIn data and publicly available stuff. And we did a comparison of them in terms of their size, number of employees, their asset value, any news that they come up with. And we published that on the Central Pattern Making website. So even though he could be accused of just promoting his competitors, what we're actually doing is providing his customers with more value. And his vision is to be, if he's not already in at one of these potential customers, because they're a customer already, he wants to be the number 2 choice. So he's banging out messaging all the time about the benefits of having dual source and having a backup supplier. And then he's producing this content to show that there are a number of other suppliers out there. We don't have to be that second choice, but we're here and we're telling you about it. He's had great feedback from his customer base about the fact that he's prepared to do this. So we've done a number of market updates for him for each of the different segments that he serves, whether it be the Formula One market, which is non-composite, sort of foundry market, and so on. So it's quite brave, and he's really keen to go ahead. He's delighted with the results that it's having, but it does challenge you to think a bit differently about what can we produce that clients actually want, even when you think it might be counterintuitive for you to do that.
And I think it's having the sort of the confidence and that desire just to create something that is a little bit different. And I think our experience has shown that every time we've done that and we've been trusted to do that, it's always worked very well. So it's about standing out, cutting through the noise. But if we move on then to the next bit, so we've gone through this process now on this growth generator that we've got of moving through from attracting strangers to the website, capturing their details, nurturing them with interesting content. But ultimately, I suppose the goal of all this is to convert prospects into customers. So we get to this point when does marketing hand over to sales? Now, part of this is around having it can be useful to have sort of almost a service level agreement between the marketing department and sales department in terms of agreeing, well, how many leads, qualified leads, can sales expect from marketing on a monthly basis, for example? What do those lead? What does qualify as a lead that can be passed over to the sales department? Clearly, a lot of salespeople don't just want anything that comes through the website. It could be a supplier inquiry, or it just could be someone that's not fit for the business. But the job of the marketing department is to qualify those leads over time, nurture them to a point, and hand them over. So HubSpot has a really neat way of being able to do this. So for every interaction that a customer or prospect or a lead has on your website, HubSpot is able to track that activity and assign it a certain number of points. Now, you can customize this to your heart's content. So you might want to say, well, anybody who downloads the Intro to Inbound ebook, will give them 30 points. And if they open an email that we send, we'll give them 5 points.
Shall I show you where we set up?
Yeah.
I can show you your record as well in a minute.
So you can go into HubSpot and depending upon your particular business requirements or your particular marketing activity, assign different scores to different bits of content or different interactions with your marketing. And then you can set it to say, well, when a lead gets to 100 points, for example, that's the point at which we send those leads over to the sales team to start working, because we know they're qualified, we know they've downloaded some content, we know they're interested in this particular thing. The sales team then have a much clearer insight into that particular prospect, and the prospect has also been moved through that buyer's journey much more efficiently and much more kind of in a manner that isn't just pouncing on them straight away because they've been on your website. So we've all been there.
We've all seen that, haven't we, where marketing will just pass any new contact through sales, and they get people chasing payment, wanting a job, wanting to supply from China, and everything in between. So that's your record.
Yeah.
We're getting a bit into what HubSpot actually looks like now. We've lifted the hood on it and actually shown you bits of it. So do you want to talk through the layout of this? This is a contact record within HubSpot.
This is a contact record. So you've got on the left-hand side sort of the details of the person. You've got all the abilities to call them, email them, message them. All those records in there. You can customize this view to see what you want to see. You can see that I've got a HubSpot score of 35. So it just sort of records that in there. You can customize this view, or you can click on those buttons to see all the different properties that are kept behind the scene. it will track if you've got the plugin on your website, website activity, so you can see how many visits have been in the most recent. And then the center column is more about the activity that's happened. So you can track website visits, you can track call to actions that have been clicked, emails that have been opened, forms that have been updated or entered. So all of this information is a real kind of rich repository of activity that's
have email opens. If anybody were trying to book a meeting with you, there's a very neat Outlook plugin if you use Outlook as your email client to be able to automatically copy emails across, including their responses. That's pretty neat. You can do it from within here as well, but most people like to do that from within Outlook. And with sales modules, you can even record the audio of a call, make the call through the browser, and it will record and then transcribe the text of that call. So you can actually search from all your records for anybody that's mentioned gardening, let's say, and you can produce content just tailored for that.
And then over on the right hand side, we've got areas that are kind of a snapshot of other parts of the system. So we've got company information up at the top. So if you wanted to have a look at the company, you could click into that and see who else was in that company and details around the company. Under that, we've got the deals. So if you can easily add a deal here or in the deal section, but it just gives you that overview. Tickets. So if you're running a sort of customer service side, HubSpot has a nice sort of ticketing system in it. Any attachments, that type of thing is all organized here. So everything is sort of one click away from a contact. So it's a very, very powerful piece of software, and yet still extremely easy to navigate around and to use.
We'll come back and have a look a bit more around the system in a minute, I think, but that makes the point nicely about that handover and the HubSpot score. Very useful.
So over to you on the ROI thing, I think.
Right, so ROI, I wanted to talk to you about this because it's important for us. You know, we say on our website, we're not just a colouring in department. This has got to be generating leads, and we give business advice as well as helping people generate leads. And we wouldn't be very good at that if we just said spend the money and don't count what comes in from it. So we had a particular case where we had a challenge from an MD of a client who wanted to be able to measure the ROI. And I'm sure as marketing people, you would have all been faced with a version of that challenge before. And we've done a reasonably decent implementation of something actually that he's very impressed with. And it needed the HubSpot automation that was available to it. We created custom fields for each of the three main databases within HubSpot. That's contacts, companies, and deals. And we made it that if a new contact came into the ecosystem, maybe responded to a social media post or search engine or whatever, then we flagged that contact as being generated by marketing. HubSpot anyway looks up who that company is. It's all automatic. It picks the domain name, go and find some public information about how big they are, and grabs a bit of text off their homepage, so that all lands in there as well. So it creates the company record. So then it automatically, through the automation of the workflows, labels that company as generated by marketing activity. And then if that company is associated with a deal that's raised, the deal is then flagged as being generated by marketing activity. And we can then produce tailored reports to come up with how much is the value of quotes issued as a result of new contacts, companies, and deals that have been generated by marketing. And then in turn, of course, how many of those quotes were won. And our argument has always been that we can't be responsible for converting all opportunities to a customer. That's the job of the sales department. But at least let's get you a decent value of RFQs, requests for quotes, to get to that point. So we showed that over a 6-month period, this particular client got about 7 times the value of the fees in marketing in new business. Of course, that customer then carries on and repeats, and didn't always have to spend more marketing to get that. But also they got something like 15 times the amount of RFQs. So they were very happy that they could point their finger at a number, see all the deals that were related, or whether they won or lost, the quote value of the deals that had all been definitely created as a result of marketing activity far exceeded the cost of the marketing. So that particular director went to the board, presented the results of this analysis, and was able to get the green light to carry on spending on this sort of activity. So I think it's important that we're happy to be held accountable for, does this stuff work? And really, that's what boards are looking for. It's not just an overhead that you spend on marketing to make sure you've got on brand signage and stationery. This is really a central part of the business process to generate leads through to the sales department.
I think as well, the HubSpot system actually allows that attribution of leads through to sales in a very quite easy way. So you can actually tie back a closed sale of one deal all the way back through to a particular contact, and that contact can maybe have clicked on a particular tweet or a LinkedIn post or something like that, and it will be able to attribute all the way through because everything is being held in that one system.
You could get ROI for a social media post.
Yeah.
So one post that's created 10 inquiries and 3 orders.
So it's a very powerful system.
Should we show a bit more of the software then?
Yeah.
Now, the problem we've got when we're demoing this, it's a bit like if you asked me to show you Microsoft Excel. Where do you start? But I could spend weeks, not just a week, showing you all the different features of it. And we know that most people use 1% of Microsoft Excel. So if I at least show you a page, and I'll talk you through the menu structure, if nothing else, because it'll give you some context of what's in there. Now, I'm opening up a demo account because I'm conscious Peter's recording this and he's going to be sending it out to other people who couldn't make it, and I think even making it available online. So I couldn't put any real data in here. But if any of you want to see this in a bit more of a working situation, then get in touch for a private viewing of this, and we'll show our actual data, if you like, and see how it works. But you can see along here the various options. And at the moment, I'm in the sales bit under deals. So this is, if you're looking for CRM, this is probably what you're familiar with seeing. There's a deal pipeline structure along the top here. You can tailor these to be whatever you want. It tells you how many deals there are in each stage, and down the bottom it gives you the value of those deals, obviously in local currency. And you can just drag and drop this stuff around. So I can grab a tile and drop it into another column. I can click on it and edit it, change any particular properties, attach a quote to it, whatever it may be. Each of these stages gets programmed with a percentage chance of success as well, so that we can do sales forecasting. And we haven't got enough time to go into this today, but we've developed some software through an employee of ours who's very into his artificial intelligence and data analysis. And we've created a plugin through the API, which is available to get into the back door of HubSpot to get to the data. And it uses AI to work out what are the most influential factors in determining whether a deal becomes won or lost. So it could be something as simple as to who the salesperson is, or the value of the deal, or how long it took in stage 3 as opposed to stage 4, or it might be how many emails we've sent them, or how we found out about them in the first place, or whatever. The point is, it can have hundreds, a limitless number of input variables, and that's the beauty of AI. You don't have to sit and do regression analysis on each of them, and it will tell you the top 10 most predictive factors that will lead to a won deal, and then it will apply those factors to give you a more accurate sales forecast. So that's all around CRM, and it's worth noting, we'll come back to this, it's worth noting that this bit of HubSpot is the free bit. So if you just wanted to have a CRM system, not particularly feature-rich on either the afters bit of dealing with sales management activities, or the pre-bit, which is everything we've been talking about today, lead generation and marketing. If you wanted to strip those bits out, this bit in the middle called the CRM is their free product. And it's free forever, it's not a trial period thing, and it's their strategy to get people into using their ecosystem, learning how easy it is to use the menu structure and all the options. And then you'll obviously see options on here which will have that annoying little flag saying this is a paid for feature, so you gradually get used to what else is available. But I've got to say, we do know several companies that are just using this free version of the CRM perfectly happily. Don't need anything else. So if you're looking around just for CRM and you're looking at considerations of others, then certainly this is worth a look at just where it is. But just going back to what else we can do, we've already shown you a particular contact record because we looked at Richard's one. So you can see all the contacts in the list here, or all the companies. We can even list the calls. We use lists quite a lot, where you split out subsets of contacts to put them into a certain list, and we generate those a lot through automation. So if somebody downloads a particular ebook, they get added to this list. And one of the pieces of collateral that we as Wellmeadow put out is an economic report every quarter. So every time someone downloads the economic report, they go into a list, so you've downloaded that. You can, if you wish, run all of your communications in and out through HubSpot. Most people prefer to use their own Outlook or Gmail, but you can, if you wish, do it all in here. But it will also manage all the other chat flows you have, including the chat bot in the bottom right-hand corner, this help button down here. You can install one of those, all included as part of it, and the other chats and flows that come from social media and tagging on Twitter and that sort of thing. Marketing is the big bit, and as Richard said at the beginning, imagine it as a one-stop shop for all those different software tools that you're used to having to manage separately at the moment. So whether you're running Google ads or LinkedIn ads or Facebook ads, that's all managed from within here. And the neat thing is, if you created a blog and immediately want to put it on social media or an ad, you just click the button to say promote this blog, and it'll offer you the option of either an ad or social media campaign. You run all your emails through here. It manages all the unsubscribes, as you can imagine, with all the different subscriptions. It's all very GDPR sensitive, and you've got a number of different options to choose between as to how rigorous you choose to apply those. Landing pages are particular web pages without any navigation, designed to have forms on them to get maximum conversion. You can manage all of your social through here. So you link your company pages for Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and so on, as well as individuals. So if you like, you can use this, a bit like you can in Hootsuite, to schedule posts going out for all the different people in your company, as if it was them, and for your company page as well. And then even on the website, you can have your own blog managed through HubSpot. Even if you've got a Drupal, WordPress, or whatever else website, you just manage that in here so that it's also all under one roof, and you're creating blog content and links through social media and so on. You can do all sorts of other clever things of putting files online and managing how they're monitored. You can even, just a reference to the files, if you point a link to that under this bit, under documents here, it will tell you who has opened that particular document and which page did they get to and how long did they spend on each page. So if you sent a proposal document, for example, to somebody through this system, it will tell you that they skimmed through the first 5 pages and spent 30 seconds on the pricing page and maybe stopped viewing it after that, or that they forwarded it to someone else and this other person then looked at a different number of pages. So very powerful for that. The one at the top is where we are now, and the forecasting is what I talked about, where it applies the percentage chance of winning to each of the columns in the deal pipeline. You can manage all your tasks through it as well. Meetings is a pretty neat feature in that it's hidden. It makes it look like it's a HubSpot page, but it's actually your page. And if you want to offer somebody access to your diary, it won't tell them what else you're doing. It'll just give 3 slots. They can book a slot in your diary. It integrates with Zoom very well, so it will create the Zoom meeting and have both of you accept it. So it will appear in both of your diaries. But the beauty of it is it immediately labels the cookie. So it's one of the 3 main ways of getting someone to identify themselves on the website. And it's a much softer way of doing it. So you can get them to respond to a marketing email or fill in a form on the website. But if you're trying to arrange a time just to have a chat, even if it's a phone chat and not a Zoom, use the meetings tool and immediately their cookie gets labeled. So you'll see if they've been on your website before for the last 6 months, and you'll get notified if they come on again. You can issue quotes through it. You go to the full paid version, have salespeople playbooks, take payments through it, and so on. But these are all more advanced features. The main thing here is this sales pipeline view. The service part of their offering is for after sales. So this is where you manage tickets, and you'll all be familiar with that. If there's some sort of after-sale conversation going on, either seeking clarification or a warranty issue on a product or a complaint or just a query on training, you can manage all that through tickets if you have that sort of environment, much more of a consumer-facing, volume-facing thing. And then there's a couple of different automation options through either the sales side of things, where it will automatically follow up emails after certain emails have been sent, or automated programmable, or the workflows, and we've mentioned those a few times already, because it's what we trigger after someone's downloaded an ebook, for example, or if they've been on a certain page on the website. It will queue up a series of emails to be sent to them, or emails to us to say, time you followed up on this person because they came on your website 3 weeks ago and haven't done anything since. Hugely powerful report options in here, and you can build some of those. So really, without going into all of those here, we wanted to show you a bit like we would if we were showing you Excel. These are the types of features it's got. You get a bit of a feel for the interface. But if anybody wants to come and have a play with this and just click on some buttons and see how it works in practice, then we're more than happy to do that. We'll probably use some real data rather than the demo account, because we can do more with it. Okay, so that's just a whistle-stop tour of what HubSpot itself looks like, and trying to give you a bit of a feature list in very quick order about what it can do. Shall we talk about alternatives as well, to just put that into context a little bit? So if I pick up the software alternatives, Now, we're fairly cynical buyers, as I think possibly in business you have to be. So we've not always been aware of or evangelists for HubSpot. It's relatively new on our radar over the last 3 years or so. But so we are aware that other CRMs exist. And for many years, when we were asked for a recommendation of a CRM for any of our clients, we would point to a few of them. I think the one that we favoured for a long time was Pipedrive, and some of you may have come across that as a reasonably decent CRM. It's nice. It's probably slightly more skewed towards the sales management end than the marketing end, but all of these CRMs are adding functionality all the time. It's a per user price thing, fairly accessible entry-level pricing for it, but it does go up quite quickly, but perfectly good enough for lots of people. Salesforce is the biggie, of course. Nearly everybody's heard of Salesforce. Interestingly, they're about the same size company as HubSpot, and everybody's heard of Salesforce, and nowhere near as many people have heard of HubSpot. And if you go back in time, about 10 years ago, they were shareholders in one another's company and worked very closely together. And their territory was kind of marked out. HubSpot dealt with the front end of marketing up to CRM, and Salesforce tended to take it from CRM through sales management. They both got greedy and started to compete in each other's patch, if you like. So they terminated their co-ownership shareholding structure, and they now out and out compete. But it's very clear where their origins come from. So if you're a marketing person looking to do lead gen up to CRM with a bit of sales management afterwards, then HubSpot is more tailored for you. If marketing is dealt with differently, or you just have a constant stream of leads for some other reason, and you're dealing with CRM through to sales management, then Salesforce tends to be the favorite solution. The key difference between the two is around the charging model. Salesforce has a much higher implementation cost, whereas HubSpot is, because as you saw, there's an out-of-the-box free version. It's a reasonably light touch implementation, a few grand rather than a few tens of thousands to implement. But the other thing is that Salesforce is per user priced. So depending on the size of your sales team, the cost of managing a Salesforce implementation can grow quite quickly. As a result of having an installation cost the way HubSpot do it, it doesn't scale as fast, but the entry level is a bit higher. So, that marketing solution we just talked about, for the software alone, you're talking £600 a month for the software. And you quickly get to and exceed that with a larger sales team on Salesforce. The point of the HubSpot is that that's a flat cost, no matter how many users you have. So it's a bit of horses for courses, and we've thrown our lot in with HubSpot, partly because it's really easy to get people up to speed with it quickly. The free CRM is very attractive to get people used to the idea of using it and linking it with Outlook. But the ease of use and the automation in it turned our heads when we saw it, so that's where we decided to throw our lot. But if people are against either of Salesforce or HubSpot, then I generally point people to Pipedrive. But as we all know, there's hundreds of others, Zoho and millions of others. So I'm not going to try and do you a full market survey of CRM. And if all you want is a CRM, why not choose the free one and just see where it bumps up against the limitations of its use. So I would say that's my quick summary of alternatives to HubSpot. What about alternatives to the lead generation process itself? And Rich, you're going to pick up on that.
Yeah, so there's sort of 4 key areas that we can look at if you're able to click on the link. So when it comes to lead generation or managing HubSpot implementation, we've sort of seen 4 different approaches to this. So the first one is, and this is mostly targeted at our sort of buyer persona of a business owner or someone who's responsible for sort of growing the leads. So you could do it yourself. It's always quite attractive because no one can ever write copy or design a website or talk about your business better than you can. The problem with that is that just who has the time? If you're busy running a business, if you're trying to manage other things, having the time to sit down and properly think through all of this content, all of this implementation, managing HubSpot, staying on top of it is pretty massive. So that's something that where a lot of people start and then just realize that the opportunity cost and the time is just they don't want to spend all their weekends writing copy and things. So then the next thing that people do, and this can work perfectly well, is to recruit your own team. Now, if you want dedicated people around you who can be there all week, really understanding your business, that is another option. What you tend to find is that can get very expensive if you're trying to get all of the skills around that you need in terms of content creation, data analysis, videography, copywriting, etc. But if you manage to get good people, then that's awesome. We've got some clients who've gone down this road, and that's working fine for them. So then what we do next is try and differentiate between a marketing agency and a growth agency. So a marketing agency, in our view, would be someone who's primarily focused around branding, creating sort of individual bits of content, maybe a website or some social media content, that type of thing. But where really they're just making the content that they're told to make by the client, and that's fine. For a lot of companies, that can work really well if that's what they need. We differentiate that from a growth agency, where the creative content is still a critical part of that, but it's much more focused on actually the strategic side of growing the business, focusing on the numbers, and probably being involved at a much more strategic level in terms of how do we address broader growth issues such as building the team, making sure the vision stays on track, focusing on the numbers a lot more, return on investments, that type of thing. So they're the sort of 4 approaches: do it yourself, recruit a load of people to do it for you, use a marketing agency if you just need kind of more creative aspects, or a growth agency, which will typically be more focused on numbers and return on investment, but also with that creative content added into it.
I think it's probably fair to say there's a hybrid as ever.
Yeah.
These things aren't as clear cut. And we've got clients where the owner will like to do a certain amount of do it yourself. And I think Pete knows who I'm talking about on that one. Can't keep his hands off it. I know a number of agencies in our position who refuse to work with any company that doesn't have at least something of an internal team. And we've found this ourselves as well, that if we're dealing with clients that don't have any internal marketing resource, it's a lot harder. So we actually prefer to work in partnership with internal marketing teams and add that extra resource externally to do the growth agency stuff. And even, to be fair, there's work that marketing agencies do that growth agencies wouldn't necessarily go as far as. So we all know some very good local marketing agencies in our towns, and they do some great stuff, and quite often we can work in partnership. If they're doing a whole rebranding exercise, we can still work on the growth agency focus, so the buyer personas, journeys, and all that content. So it can be a hybrid solution. So as you can see, there's a page on the website where we split that out, and that might be useful if you're considering a position paper for your board or whatever to work out which direction it's going.
There's no right or wrong to it. It's just what works for your business, really.
Okay, so that's the alternative approaches, which I think brings us back to Peter again to list any Q&As.
Brilliant. Thank you, chaps. I've been sent a few questions. Does HubSpot work best in a business-to-business environment or a business-to-consumer environment, or does it not really matter from that point of view?
I think what matters, rather than that distinction, is whether the thing you're selling is a considered purchase. So if you're talking about something reasonably transactional that people don't research much beforehand, then that's not really where HubSpot is ideally suited. So if you think everything we've talked about on that buyer journey, if that's all condensed down to a 5-second Google search, pick the top one, or go for the cheapest on eBay, that's not necessarily where any amount of this content will ever get read. But if it's a considered purchase, certainly B2B tends to be a lot more considered purchases, thinking around capital goods and services and that sort of thing, and business to consumer items of higher ticket items or things that people desire, more luxuries, then that tends to be where having this content to talk you around it, give you lots of extra content and advice, that tends to work a lot better.
Giving people a more informed sale then, yeah.
Sorry?
Giving people the more informed sale, I guess.
Exactly. Yeah. You can imagine if you've thought about buying a car any time in the last 10 years, you probably start your journey on the web, don't you? Reading reviews and looking at Autocar and seeing what prices are and so on. So it's that considered purchase end of things.
You mentioned that it works really well with kind of the existing WordPress websites that I know a lot of people on this call will have. What sort of integrations does it have with WooCommerce as well, which is the e-commerce element of WordPress?
Yeah, it does integrate, but I think by their own admission, partly because they're trying to come up with their own payment system and e-commerce as well, it's probably more suited to the informational side rather than the transactional side of websites. The integration that we talked about with WordPress is very, very simple. It's a plugin. We're all familiar with these plugins in WordPress. And once you've installed it once in one place, that's it. So you have short form ways of publishing forms to the website and grabbing the content back and monitoring traffic page by page. So it's a very strong integration. So the WooCommerce, in terms of which pages of people visited, would all be very visible. But there's nothing more feature-wise, I don't think, that's tailored to e-commerce than just what pages people.
I know a lot of people will be running their landing pages that they built in the back end of WordPress as well. Does HubSpot have any options for allowing A/B testing? So can we set up certain campaigns to go to certain pages, other campaigns to go to other pages that you can then run tests and get quality scores based on that?
Yeah, it's very rich functionality area actually with HubSpot, because they're so focused on this being data driven. You did an email A/B recently as well, which is similar to the way they do landing pages.
Yeah.
I'm going to talk through that.
Yeah, so it's a very simple kind of setup for both landing pages, emails, web page. You can A/B as well. It's a case of just basically building your landing page and then setting that up within HubSpot, and then just creating a kind of a B version of it, as it were. Change the content you need to change, and it runs the test. And the neat thing with it, depending on how much data you've got in terms of contacts, you can sort of define the test parameters quite easily. If you've got 5,000 contacts in your database, you might say, well, we want to do the A/B test on the first 1,000, split that 50-50, and then whichever one wins, that will go out after a certain amount of time. Or so there's quite a bit of customization you can do around that kind of A/B testing functionality. Just to pick up on a point on the previous question as well on the WooCommerce, it's worthwhile looking at the HubSpot App Store. Is pretty massive. There are an awful lot of integrations and plugins in there. So there are things in there for WooCommerce and for WordPress as well. So there's an awful lot out there in terms of third-party integrations, which will talk neatly with HubSpot. They're looking to HubSpot are strategically looking to reposition themselves as a platform rather than a marketing tool, as it were. So they're looking to be able to be that hub, as it were, for all of your different business things.
So would you say HubSpot is a replacement for tools like Hootsuite and MailChimp?
Definitely, yeah. It's all included in it as part of the subscription. You wouldn't need to pay twice for it. And it's all a lot more connected up. So yeah, the scheduling and the linking of things like social media to the blogs and any other contact data you've got, it's all under one roof. So that's the whole point of it, really.
Okay. There's a number of people on this call that have PPC or AdWords campaigns that are run by us. How does HubSpot kind of fit into that life cycle there?
It doesn't stop you still using, let's say, Google's interface or LinkedIn or Facebook's for doing the adverts, but you can also access them from within HubSpot. So I would suggest if anybody had a HubSpot implementation and they'd outsourced the management of that, they would just add that outsourced company as users, and they could manage that all then from within HubSpot. It doesn't cost any more. Like I say, it's a flat fee for the implementation. So,
and is that the same for Google Shopping campaigns as well?
It doesn't manage Google Shopping, as I know, separately from AdWords, does it? Interesting.
Not natively.
We've come across, because that's more of a consumery thing, isn't it? And most of our clients are B2B.
Yeah.
Very interesting to see. Just a point on the adding of other users. You've got incredibly refined levels of control over what access different users have. And we've come across this very pointedly in a couple of clients where a very senior person has left, for example, and you can clamp down who has the right to export data, as well as even see data. Can they only see their own data? Can they see their team's data? Can they see everybody's data? Can they edit it, delete it, create their own, all sorts of things. So it's very powerful in managing permission controls. Okay.
So it's looking through some of these other questions. What's the kind of the setup or the onboarding process for HubSpot?
Well, HubSpot are quite protective about this, aren't they? They won't allow you to subscribe to HubSpot unless you have a paid onboarding process, which they will offer you, but they will waive that if you're going through a partner like us who's going to be able to onboard you and then carry on supporting you to make sure you get the best out of the software. So I think they're very aware of the fact they don't want a bad reputation from people who sign up for it and then don't actually spend the time to set it up properly and get used to it. So they force you to do that through that mechanism. Either you pay for onboarding through them or through us. Typically, it's mapped out as a 90-day onboarding. But as we said earlier, with the free CRM, you can save yourself some money by doing the free bit first to get your data uploaded. And there's a certain amount of effort required in that, as you can imagine. And then you take on the paid license when you need those features towards the end of the onboarding process.
Brilliant, brilliant. What are the best ways to get management to buy into HubSpot?
Buy them the book. You're a bit flippant, but there's this book out there called They Ask, You Answer by Marcus Sheridan. And on more than one occasion, probably 3 clients I can think of now, where we've recommended the book, they bought it. They then told us that they bought another 10 copies of it and gave it to all of their team. It was written from one person's point of view of his journey, trying to run a marketing and sales operation within a company. It's American, of course, but he talks it in a very persuasive way. He then discovers HubSpot and uses it, talks about the success he's had. So it's a very approachable way if somebody's prepared to read a book. It's not a long book, is it? No. It's very well written. So I think our biggest recruiting sergeant so far has been probably that book, and there's a review of the book on our website if you want to just get the quick version of it. So that's maybe a flippant answer. I don't know. It depends if you can accidentally drop a copy of the book on your manager's desk or your director's desk.
I think as well that there are things. I mean, you've got that everything under one roof argument rather than having different systems for managing sales. Or I mean, it depends. It probably depends where the starting point is. If everything's in spreadsheets and you're trying to manage all of that, then moving it into a free HubSpot CRM is a sort of quantum leap forward for very little cost. Going on to some more of the paid features, again, it depends on what, if that can be tied into more business growth, better quality of lead tracking, ability to measure ROI. Those are all sorts of things that sort of the board like to hear.
Okay, brilliant. Let's have a look. Is HubSpot a replacement for tools like SEMrush?
No, we have SEMrush as a tool ourselves. We use it in conjunction with it. It will give SEO recommendations of its own, but I think SEMrush is much more powerful, and we use that in conjunction.
You mentioned HubSpot automation. Have you got any good examples of where this has worked well?
Well, from the trivial through to some of the examples we showed you earlier with the scoring, but we automate, for example, if a new contact arrives and hasn't got a surname attached, that sends off a task to the contact owner just to complete that. We do a lapsed customer report. So if we have contacts that have been identified as a customer in the past and then no activity for 6 months or a year, it sends off an email to someone to do something. When we download assets, it sends a load of emails staggered to keep engagement going.
Yeah, I think so. For example, if you were to download this amazing ebook, which I'm sure you'll all download, what you'll get enrolled into a workflow off the back of that form, which will then send out 4 different emails with different bits of content in it, and but once that's set up once, that just runs in the background. So it kind of enables you to focus on new things rather than having to continually think about following up. And those workflows can be as complicated or as simple as you want to make them. So you can combine workflows as well if you need to, all sorts of things. So it's very flexible.
You don't have to be a programmer either. It's a very easy drop and drag sort of interface to set the program up for what you want it to do.
Brilliant. That's all the questions I was sent. Has anybody else got any questions before we wrap up?
I really appreciate the questions that come through already, Peter. Thank you for those. Thank you everybody for putting those questions through to Pete. And as we indicated earlier, if you want to see more of it, then you need to get back in touch with us and we'll show you a more in-depth view.
So, I mean, if you do have any questions or anything, need any more information about inbound marketing, lead generation, HubSpot, and so on, then speak to David and Richard here. They've been really helpful and really useful today. If there's anything on the web side of things, any web design, web development, digital marketing, SEO, come and talk to me or Emma or one of our guys, and we can help you out. Brilliant. Thank you everybody for coming today, and hopefully see you in a webinar in the future.
Thanks, Peter. Thanks for organising it.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks a lot. Cheers all.
Thank you.
Bye.